Good morning. All right. Hey, I was just added to the adult planning group for adult Sunday school. They wanted to bring in a little bit of youth onto the adult Sunday school planning. I don't know what that says. This is says the guy with the white beard, right? So this is my first go around at introducing and whatnot. But luckily, I got a good one because we know all these folks, so I don't have to do much of an introduction. The one introduction I will say is this: this week we'll be talking about our trip to the border, which I was on that trip, and so my antenna have been up about this topic that much more. But I don't know about you, but you can't open the news these days without hearing about this. In fact, how timely that the day that we are having this Sunday school presentation, President Biden is in El Paso today, where we were. And in fact, the last several weeks, when I look at my online app for the New York Times and they show the view of the border where a lot of things are taking place, where people are camping out, where folks are trying to cross and sometimes are crossing. Just several weeks ago, I hope I'm not stealing your thunder, but just several weeks ago, we stood there and I watched as Angel interacted with some folks from Venezuela, and then while we were standing there talking, we watched people cross the river, go up the bank, and turn themselves in. And the view that they show on the news all the time it's like they are standing with a camera exactly where we were standing just weeks ago. So this is a very timely Sunday school. You will be led today by two of your pastors, Ryan and Angel, and by Laura Bear, who is a member of our congregation, is a nurse and also is bilingual and brought all kinds of great empathetic, right? You have empathy gifts to our trip. I can only say that every time I turned around, Laura was off having a heart-to-heart with someone who was waiting to cross the border. And so I look forward personally to hearing from them, even though I was on this trip. And I hope that this will also lead to some good discussion, given how relevant this is for our congregation and how some of the stories you may hear today are the stories of our congregation. Let me open in prayer. Dear Lord, thank you for gathering us to have this discussion, to hear a report, but also help us into the reality of this part of our world and how this part of our world and your world intersects with our congregation. Bless our time together. Amen.
Buenos días. ¿Cómo están? How are you? For those who, I think there are people on Zoom as well, but for those who don't know me, my name is Angel Lopez, and one of the pastors. I have two hats, right? One here, and then on top of that, imagine I have two hats that I do in our congregation and also in our denomination. So my first hat is that I am a pastor, one of the pastors at El Encuentro. We're having a service right now over there. And I am also a missionary in the Reformed Church in America, in Global Mission. So it's two hats. And both of them are connected with immigration, with the immigrant community, and with the kingdom of God. So this is exciting for me, very exciting. So I would like, if I have the first slide, so you can see there. So this morning, we're going to talk about our trip, learning trip to the border. To our border. So I'm a Mexican, I was born then, and you were born here, and we share this huge border. That's our border. And as a church, we went to the border. You see, Laura A lot of earth there, and this is very significant because one leg is in the United States and the other leg is in Mexico, right? That's the main reason that we put there. And we were there. And in the back of her, it's a plaque that says, the United States of America, and the other side, in the Spanish, is Los Estados Unidos Mexicanos, which is the real name of Mexico. So, we are traveling to our border. We are traveling, and me as a pastor, I'm trying to invite churches from our congregation, from my Holland area, from the country, to visit us there, where our brothers and sisters are living. And then the other hat, which is we doing this through the Reformed Church in America. So that's how we're doing things. So we go through the Reformed Church in America, and together we are inviting other churches to participate and to see our border. Okay? The next slide, please. And who went there? You know, these beautiful people in the pictures. So we went people from Third Reformed Church, also from Fellowship Reformed Church, and from Lighthouse Advocate Immigrants. So 3 organizations went there. So you know some of them from our church, our artist, Joel, and we talk about our art at the border, which is a different thing there. So Pastor Ryan was there, Pastor Hunter was there, Laura was there, and also, you know Pastor Nate Skipper, right? So Pastor Nate Skipper went with us as well. And her daughter, we call her Eva, but I think in English is Eva. So we call her Eva. Eva speaks both English and Spanish. She helped us to translate while we were there. While sometime we needed to communicate something in Spanish, she will translate for us. It's beautiful. So, and then we have the Solis, Kenzie, we have Doug over there, and then we have also the lawyer from Lighthouse, Sam and Grace. And both of them work for Lighthouse, and they are helping us here to carry on with legal sides of our brothers and sisters here in El Encuentro. Okay, this is the people that we went there. Next slide, please. And then we went and really touched the wall. And that's one of the activities that we do is go and see and feel it and take a picture and be there. So some of the activities that we do there. And next slide, please. And not only see and touch, we walk with the immigrants there. So it's very scary sometimes, right? We don't know anybody. But we try to work and walk with them and speak. And they are afraid of us, and we are afraid of them, but we're there. And that part is the experience. And the beautiful things in this ministry is that people from 11 years old, 13 years old, to people from 69-year-old, 70, are coming to those to the border with us. So it's intercultural, how do you call it? There we go. De diferentes edades, mucho más fácil en español. Entonces, so this is Frontera de Gracia ministry. And I'm so happy to be part of this. And I just want to say thank you to all of you who are praying and supporting this ministry. So I think there's one more picture, but I will leave it that way. But one of the questions that I always ask, and those who go to the border, is the Rio Grande. where Joe was talking, people walking, crossing the border. One of the questions I have for Laura is that, Laura, when I said, what is your idea? Or your imagination right now, what do you think about the border right now? Just before you go to the border, what is that you hope to see at the border? And then I flip it again, that question, and I said, hey, tell me also, what was the story that you found at the border? And that's how I would like to start with Laura, before and after this experience at the border.
All right, so actually I kind of prepared my remarks in a little different way than that. So let me think about that for a second. So hi, I'm Laura Bear, and part of my expectations, I guess, going down there, I was in some ways expecting to find the migrants, the people in transit, with a lot of anxiety and a lot of also boredom, just kind of being there, waiting, not sure what's going to happen next. And I did find both of those things actually, but I was just surprised. You never know how God's going to kind of work on your heart. So I'd like to back up a little bit, and just Angel had asked me to share my background, because each of us in the group, we bring our own unique backgrounds and perspectives. So for me, I'm married to Carter. I have 4 kids, and I had first kind of, Joel mentioned that I speak Spanish. I had first kind of fallen in love with the Spanish language and Latino culture in middle school, when it was really the first time, even though I grew up in Holland, the first time I was exposed to Latino culture at all. And so throughout high school and in college and starting out as a nurse, I was really interested in that culture. Then when I was pregnant with James, my oldest, raise your hand. He's here with us. Carter and I were living in Guatemala, so we got to live there for about 10 months that year. And being there, being pregnant, expecting our first child, just made a really big impact on me. I was very influenced by the Guatemalan women and the way that they mothered, the way they breastfed their children and carried them on their backs in a carrier, the way the family unit worked. We were there long enough to really make relationships with people there, attended a wedding and a heartbreaking funeral, and were invited into homes for dinner. So all of that shows that I was able to just get a sense of kind of what home was like, at least for I was working with these kind of local indigenous Guatemala population. But I got a sense of what home is like in Latin American culture. And then the juxtaposition of that with the instability that I saw at the border sort of made an impact. And also, I'm a nurse, and I've spent most of my career doing home visits, actually, with pregnant women and babies up until a year ago when I started working at the hospital. But before that, I was almost always out in the community, seeing a lot of Spanish-speaking families in their homes. And I just love families. I love young families especially, and know the value and the importance of a stable home, a safe home for children's development, for parents to be mentally healthy, to be able to raise their children. And so when I got to the border, my eye was just drawn to the families, to the young families that we saw. And so if we can have the next slide. This is actually a picture, I did not take this. It's a picture from the New York Times. On our way down there, Jim Padilla de Borst had shared a New York Times article with us about migrants traveling through the Darien Gap, which is the land path between Colombia and Panama. I just didn't realize that there's thousands and thousands of people traveling this 10-day trek through a muddy jungle where there's no road there because it can't be built. to get just to Central America and to be able to start coming up north. So I read that article, and I tried to put it on the slide. It's from a November 9 New York Times article called "A Girl Loses Her Mother in the Jungle." And it's not actually about this couple, but they showed this couple in the article. And the next day, we're down by the Rio Grande, by the Venezuelan camp, and I saw this family, and I was really drawn. You can see the babies in a baby carrier. Maybe, I don't know, you can't see the light that well. I love baby carriers, so I was like, wow, just looking at that. And when I saw them walking, they were all cleaned up. They weren't muddy anymore. And my eye caught his eye. He had the baby at that point. And we were just kind of looking at each other, and something about them really drew me. But I never did get to talk to them. But I was just, that incident and many others showed me just how, I don't know, kind of like broke down this wall between reading the news. So here I am reading this article in the New York Times, and then seeing this family right at the border. And there were many other instances like that the trip just made it very like palpable for me, what's going on at the border. And it just brought up a lot of questions for me, you know, like just think, like how are they caring for this child without any home? You know, how are they getting diapers? How are they getting enough food for them? They're Venezuelan. They were living at this camp that we'll see pictures of later. A tent on a concrete bank next to a dirty river. It just brings up so many questions, you know? If the child were to get sick, if the mother or father were to get sick, could they get medical care? Well, you know, it's just such an unstable environment for a family to be in. And then if we can go to the next slide. This is a picture of me talking to a family at Frontera de Gracia. So this is a family staying at our sister church's shelter, and in a better situation in some ways because they actually have a roof over their head, not just a tent. They're with community. They have access to a kitchen and food. We went there one night, and the church cooked a big dinner for us. It was lovely, and then we had some time afterwards to socialize. And I went over and talked to them, and just heard their story. They were willing to share with me their experience. They had left El Salvador. So this is a father. Here you can just see the mother with her son, and then the daughter sitting next to me. And then the other woman is from Haiti, who they had kind of adopted into their family. So it was a mother and a father, 3 children, and then the father's mother. And they had left El Salvador because of being threatened by a cartel. At gunpoint, they had threatened to kill his whole family, and so they fled. I could add a little more to the story, but I want to be careful of time. And had a grueling journey from El Salvador up through Mexico, including their 7-year-old daughter was sexually assaulted on the way. And also when they got to the border, the mother, Carolina, who's there, was almost kidnapped. And they were with another guy from El Salvador who actually was kidnapped. They were both running across a highway, and a car stopped, and they were able to get this other guy in, and they never had heard from him again. So it just speaks to the danger, the violence there. So they were at this shelter, and this is an open shelter. People can come and go as they wish, but they said they're just not leaving the shelter. They don't even really dare to go out to the streets. And so I just had a lot of questions about this family as well. They're waiting to be called up by Border Patrol for, in a kind of a more official way to cross. Just I'm thinking about the children and their development. I'm thinking about the parents and all the worries and stresses on their shoulders. And in both of these situations, I think the family, the couple from Venezuela, I think of the bravery and the grit, that they demonstrate and traveling through a jungle with a baby and trying to get to America for this family, all that they've been through, but the love that they have for one another. There's a lot of beautiful, good, strong things you can find at the border, but it's also just in this context of instability, vulnerability, and so it was a lot, I think, for all of us. Being there just kind of to go, to witness, to be able to hear people's stories. But I just wanted to share from my perspective and who I am and how I saw things there. And now we'll get to hear from Ryan.
The questions that Angel asked us to engage with is kind of like what we thought before we left, and then how has that been experienced as we were there and since processing. And I think I would just want to say, before I left, this was a conversation for me in part to understand part of our congregation better. Right? Like this is, right now there is a service of Third Reformed Church happening in a different place. It's just over there across the hallway. And many of them have stories like Laura just told, right? Stories about how they got here. And that is one of the things that I was eager to go down and see. And I don't really know what order my pictures are in because I'm far less organized than everybody else. So just like throw a picture up a minute and I'll get to what I actually want to talk about being down there. So as an aside, as we're waiting for that picture, I just want to say one thing. Pastor Angel promised that he would feed us when we went down there, and he did not. And I'm very disappointed, and I'm just kidding. Pastor Angel, it was like we ate every 2.5 hours, I think. It was madness, and I loved every second of it. Anyways, so what this did, and allow me just a second because of the way that my brain works, I couldn't help but be drawn as I was standing on the border, as we were touching the wall, as we were going to a camp, like this is the Venezuelan camp that was very famous in the news for a few weeks. I couldn't help be drawn to some of my doctoral work from a few years ago in thinking about a theology of place, about what it means to be placed. What does it mean to have a place, to not have a place? In his book, The Space Between, it's about Christian engagement with a built environment by Eric Jacobson, and I would recommend this book. It talks about how Christians engage with structures and like those kinds of things. But one of the things that Jacobson talks about in his book is a theology of the Lord's Supper, where he begins to ask, what about this cup and that plate and that pitcher? What do we say about the bread, the wheat, the water, the salt? What do we say about the grapes that make the wine? And his question is, how did it get here? How did it get here? And then he extrapolates that out for the church to say, well, what about those that put their shoes on and go out the door and gather at a place like this and come down the aisles and walk to that bread and walk to that cup? How did they get here? There is a placeness, a get-here-ness that Jacobson wants to engage with, and that's what we were able to engage with at the border. What does it mean to get here, and where is here anyway? And what does that even mean in relationship to us and place? And how I interacted with this place, this place here, and how those that were in the camp interacted with that place was very different. It was very different. Because I have a U.S. passport. So how I engage with that place is I get to walk across the border and I get to look at that place. And then when we're done, I get to walk back across the border. That is my interaction with that place. Because of who I am, my interaction with this physical space is different. I know I'm getting super nerdy, but I promise I will land the plane in a minute. And what we talk about when we talk about that kind of engagement is what in his monumental work, The Sacred and the Profane, The Nature of Religion, the author in this book, another book that I would highly recommend, but I'm not saying the author's name because I don't quite know how. Anyways, what he talks about is the interesting concept that is to settle a territory is equivalent to consecrating it. To settle a territory is to consecrate it for the religious. And so you have people that left spaces that were theirs, that were consecrated, that was home. And for more thinking about home, there's a new seminary professor who was hired, Alberto La Rosa, who works on immigration and a theology of home, and it's beautiful, amazing stuff. Anyways, so when we think about this, you have persons trying to get to another place, having to travel through a physical space that is so detached from a sense of homeness and beingness that for them there is this journey of identity that as we engaged with them, they were interacting with this physical space in a much, much different way than I was. A much different way. Their questions were not my questions. Let's go to the next picture here, just because I think there's another. When some of these immigrants eventually cross the border, and they go to the officials who are there standing armed, and they declare asylum because of the many stories that we could tell. Out of a desperation, fleeing home and coming to the United States seeking safety, those that are fortunate enough to have stamped papers and be given a ticket gather here. This is the El Paso airport. They've made it to the United States, and now what? One of the most marked moments of our trip actually happened on the last day. We were just arriving back in the El Paso airport, and there is a group that helps these asylum seekers understand what their papers are saying to them. Because sometimes they are given a plane ticket and paper with very little instruction beyond that. And they are taken from where they are to the airport, and they are dropped off. And we watched on the last day as a bus showed up to the side door of the airport, and a group of about 20 to 30 people, I think, got off and then stood there waiting. They weren't sure what to do. And in fact, one couple we engaged with, we realized that they had plane tickets. They had plane tickets to Long Island and had to get to a shelter, and they didn't know how, all the way in Brooklyn. How do they do that? They weren't told. They weren't given any instruction. There wasn't a place. This suspension of place and rootedness is enough to make, I think, any of us feel uncomfortable. If you've ever been without place, maybe you were just moving from a place to another place. You already had the place, but you were maybe sleeping on a friend's couch, maybe with your in-laws, whatever it is, and you're just there. Do you remember how disorienting that can feel, to not have your own place? To not feel like this is the place you know. This is the place that is home. When we as followers of Jesus think about place, well, we think about maybe places like this. In addition to our homes, we think about this space, this physical space in which we can walk into, maybe after an incredibly hard week, and take in oxygen, maybe in what it feels like for the first time in a week, and say, space, the Lord's space, a holy space on the Lord's day. Maybe we can gather and place that. Next picture. But everything that we engaged on this trip suggested a temporality of space. A temporality of space. Here is the camp again that we've seen a few pictures of at that famous spot we've all talked about. And it's all about place. It's tents, not cinder block, not drywall. It's tents. This is place. And at the time when we were interacting with this place and they were interacting with this place, there wasn't a great deal of clarity about how long they would be in this place. So it's not like there's something that they can point to and they can say, yes. So how do you consecrate a place that you're not sure is your place? And what even is your place when you've had to leave home and you've had to come to a new place? When does that place stop becoming a place and start becoming home? How does that happen? I think these are the questions that I was most pondering. Because on this trip, we got to do a lot of amazing things. Got to speak with some government representatives. A man that we got to speak to was really incredible, and I learned a lot from him. It was meaningful to talk to him. We went to other shelters, and we heard their stories. We went to, again, as Laura mentioned, Frontera de Gracia. It was wonderful. We talked to people at this camp. We got to talk to a lot of people and have a lot of different encounters. But a wondering about that I kept coming back to is, but what does it mean to be here in this place? Because I know how to answer that for me. But we have members of Third Reformed Church for whom this was their journey, and this was their moment of space and place. And they sat with this place much different than I did. Is there one more picture? I'm not even sure. I'm just talking now. Oh, yeah. There's me, and there's Hunter, and there's Paul. We're just... One of the things, and I know one of the things I wanted to say about this place at the border, one of the things before I left I thought would just be shocking and all the time was that there would be a wall. I thought that is always just going to be like front and center. And it's amazing how quickly that wall disappears while you're there. It's like you're there, but then you've seen it, and eventually, like, you just see it, and it's there. And it stops being this thing that looks so intimidating, so cruel, and it just becomes a part of the landscape. I had a really artsy conversation with Joel that we cannot possibly get into today, but maybe like part 2 or part 38, whenever we finally make it there, about the way the shapes of this space are designed. But what I want to say about this place is, in a conversation with Pastor Angel and a man named Francisco, it was that when we talk about this place and this wall, Francisco said, yeah, it's amazing how many people in a city of 1.5 million, which is Juarez, how many people don't understand that immigration and the border is like an issue we should be talking about. And I was like, whoa. And we kind of blew my mind for a minute. And then I said, well, the same thing about where we live. Right? It's amazing how many of us can like forget that this stands in a place that we interact with in the lives of other members of our own congregation. And that's what kind of stuck with me as we thought about it. So I want to leave you with something. I want to leave you with a poem. And this poem is called Home, and it's long, but it's worth a read. And it is written by Warsan Shire, a Somali British poet who fled Somalia. And it's about this idea of leaving home and what that is. I want to warn you that there is some hard language in here. So listen and just like take it in. No one leaves home unless home is the mouth of a shark. You only run for the border when you see your whole city running as well. Your neighbors running faster than you, breath bloody in their throats, the boy you went to school with, who kissed you dizzy behind an old tin factory, is holding a gun bigger than his body. You only leave home when home won't let you stay. No one leaves home unless home chases you, fire under feet, hot blood in your belly. It's not something you ever thought of doing until the blade burnt threats into your neck, and even then, you carried the anthem under your breath, only tearing up your passport in an airport toilet, sobbing as each mouthful of paper made it clear that you wouldn't be going back. You have to understand that no one puts their children in a boat unless the water is safer than the land. No one burns their palms under trains, beneath carriages. No one spends days and nights in the stomach of a truck feeding on newspaper unless the miles traveled means something more than journey. No one crawls under fences. No one wants to be beaten, pitied. No one chooses refugee camps or strip searches where your body is left aching, or prison, because prison is safer than the city of fire, and one prison guard in the night is better than a truckload of men who look like your father. No one could take it. No one could stomach it. No one skin would be tough enough. The go home blacks, refugees, dirty immigrants, asylum seekers, sucking our country dry. People with their hands out, they smell strange, savage, messed up their country, and now they want to mess up ours. How do the words, the dirty looks roll off your backs? Maybe because the blow is softer than the limb torn off, or the words are more tender than 14 men between your legs, or the insult's easier to swallow than rubble, than bone, than your child whose body is in pieces. I want to go home, but home is the mouth of a shark. Home is the barrel of a gun, and no one would leave home unless home chased you to the shore, unless home told you to quicken your legs, leave your clothes behind, crawl through the desert, wade through the oceans, drown, save, be, hunger, beg, forget pride. Your survival is more important. No one leaves home until home is a sweaty voice in your ear saying, leave. Run away from me now. I don't know what I've become, but I know that anywhere is safer than here. When I think about this trip and the opportunities that we had to engage, that poem may seem over the top. But I'll tell you that story after story that we've heard that are present in our own church, and I would ask those of you in Sunrise Saints to maybe back me up here too. A book that we're reading, Voices of the Border, these aren't unique stories. This poem isn't a unique tale. It happens every day, all the time. And so when we think about place, both the place left, the place on the journey, and the place some people may end up, how does the church, how do persons, how do we start giving a consecration of a place like that? How does Jesus show up in the place? So that's part of what I experienced there. And at this point, and a lot of other points, I think after the three of us, we would just love to know, as you've heard our conversations here, what does this stir up in you? Are there any questions, comments that you would like to make? And we can help get a microphone out so that people can be heard. Those of you on Zoom who are joining us, we're so glad you did, and we're sorry that you had the choice of either picture or us, but the pictures, so anyway. So just wanted to make sure that if you also had a question or comment, that you would be welcome to offer it at this time. Does anyone have anything they'd like to share?
Yes, so we have about 10 minutes to have some discussion. Here we go.
My husband and I have led many mission trips, and I'm curious, what is your project and your interest with a youth group in going down?
Not only with the youth, but with everybody. One thing is, I would love to take you to the border, to all of you, really. But one thing I'm hoping, and I'm hoping to show, and I'm hoping you to feel, is that you find Jesus at the border. At the end of the day, I want you to see that God is there at the border. How, when, how they shape this God who created the heaven and earth and all, and this land too. I hope that you could experience God at the border. And we talk to the people, to leaders, pastors, political leaders. We talk to nurses. We talk to people who have been working there for many, many years. We talk and eat with the local people and ask all the questions that you can think of, because you will bring tons of questions. Sadly, you will end your trip there, third or fourth day, and you will have more questions on top of those questions. So, by the end of the day, I want you specifically to sit down, to eat, to listen, to ask questions.
And that's part of what the youth will be doing, is engaging in experience. Like
Oh, and not only the youth, everybody.
Yep.
Yeah? No? Do you have a question? Anyone? It's a lot to take in, right? It's one of the parts of the trip that they didn't say is we played volleyball while we were there at a middle school.
I can pull those pictures up. We should pull those pictures up.
What was super fun was we got to engage with Angel's brother and family, and because we had people like Laura along and some younger kids too that got really dug in and found out what was going on in their lives, we learned that Miriam and Lorena's cousins had a volleyball game, and so we went to watch them play volleyball, which was really weird. So you see all these hard things and experience hard things, and then we engaged in regular sort of life. And we watched them play, and we cheered on, and it was just like, I just can only imagine what all the other people at the middle school were thinking. It's like, why are all these gringos cheering for this team? It's like, what's going on? Yeah. And then we played volleyball with them afterwards. So there's something really good, too, about just experiencing life while we're there. Yeah, Lorraine.
What's the best food you ate?
Oh, man. I mean, this is such an individualized question.
What was that drink at breakfast?
There was, oh man, this cactus juice with, cactus, pineapple, and celery.
Celery and pineapple.
I could have that every day, all day. It was amazing. You can
put a little bit of pepper too.
But then the tacos at the elders' house, my favorite tacos.
I think Miriam has a question.
So I've walked across the border before, and I was wondering if you could explain to everyone how bizarre the process is to just walk into Mexico when you hear about how difficult it is to get out of Mexico. Like, explain like how, like, the routine. Like, you go there, get to the airport, and then what? You know, like, sort of like how it is walking into Mexico, the feeling, because it's really bizarre, I think.
So, go ahead, Laura.
Well, yeah, when we walked into Mexico, we did pass through a small little building with a couple guys working that did want to, our bags did go through a little security scanner, but it was pretty kind of sleepy feeling.
Yeah.
And then there we were in Mexico. So it was very easy to enter Mexico. I don't think we had to show any identification at all. No, they just wanted to scan our bags. Meanwhile, on the way coming back into the United States, yeah, there were CBP, Customs Border Patrol officials on the bridge, and then at the station where we had to pass through, we had to show our ID, scan our bags, and there were cars waiting to go through X-ray machines. Cars and trucks would, especially trucks. I think all trucks had to go through these huge X-ray machines. I guess they were looking for people inside or other material, and in general, much more sort of militarized feel coming into the country.
I would love to say too, something interesting for Americans and Mexicans is this, somehow when you're at the border, right there, something happened to you, watch. When you are in the United States, everything works perfectly on time. You cross that border, you cross, and somehow your watch doesn't work at all. So that's something that you need to put in your mind when you cross a border with us. Please keep in mind that your watch will not work over there.
Well, that was compounded for us because it's at a weird spot of time zones where we were, and so depending what cell phone tower your phone was pinging off of, we were on different time zones. So the first day, we all showed up at different times for breakfast because we all, I don't know, somewhere on Central, somewhere on Mountain, somewhere on Hill.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's two more questions over there.
I've been thinking about that picture along the Rio Grande with all those tents there.
Mm-hmm.
There must have been hundreds of people in those tents. How did they get food?
Pastor Samuel and other shelters bring food sometimes, not all the time. So people are sometimes starving for 1 or 2 days, but we try to provide food for everybody. So different churches, different NGOs goes there. And also, if they know they're going to be there for 2-3 months, they begin to buy candies and resell it and try to get some money and buy food there. But it's complicated to get food, bathroom, a place to sleep. And there was winter. And a lot of people are from close to the equator, it's really, really hot. And Ciudad Juarez is desert, and it was very cold. So it's not an easy staying there. It's not home. Mm-hmm. So, very difficult.
We met with a government organization that is not immigration, but they were charged with kind of taking care of the migrant issue at the border.
Correct.
So we spent hours talking with Enrique, who is in charge of that, and I was really impressed to see that even though they didn't create this problem, they had a lot of compassion for the migrants. And in terms of that Venezuelan camp, they were really trying to encourage them to not camp there, to move into the shelters rather than staying in tents. So they had workers, volunteers out there trying to engage with the people. And my understanding was that a lot of the reason the Venezuelans had a lot of distrust of going into shelters or anything kind of official, because in their own home country and traveling through, many times people in uniforms or in positions of power actually are the abusers. And so they just felt safer being in tents altogether, yeah.
Both of the last two comments that you've made have fed right into my concern. As we read the paper, hear the news, we hear a lot about violence and different value systems, certainly. You talked about the different climate. You talked about the fact that people are fearful. How does that kind of cultural clash work itself through? How do the people who come in and can actually find a new home, a new place in this country? I know it takes time, but do you have experience with any of that? It's not going to happen overnight. What cultural clashes are they bringing?
Like here? Are you asking about like if they were to settle in Holland, for instance? Oh, okay. So like what kind of cultural clashes exist from people coming into other countries with people that are already here, Americans, like in Holland? Yeah? Okay. Yeah.
So one of the challenge, and I'm gonna start soft and then strong, but one of the challenge is the time. Again, somehow the time changed. This is a cultural thing. It is really, really hard. You will notice that you go to Mexico and they say, Pastor Angel, you say that at 9:01 we're gonna start this, and it's already 12:01. What's going on here? You know, that throw you off. And they coming from Mexico, Venezuela, Nicaragua, and you are here. And your appointment is at 10:00 a.m. You are not ready for this. So that's the challenge. If you miss your hearing at the lawyer, with the attorney, with the judge, that is really bad. So there's no tolerance here for time. So as much as you go there in Mexico and you get frustrated with time, those who are coming here, time is a problem. Money is a problem. We don't make money as you make money here. Food, we don't eat the food that you eat, but there is no other option to eat the food that you put the Myers or Walmart put in our plate. So those are the challenge. Lots of people don't know how to drive cars. And one of the biggest challenge for our group, for example, Pastor, we don't have a car in our country, but here you have to have a car. And I said, but how did you do it in Nicaragua and Venezuela? Oh, easy, Pastor. Everybody has a motorcycle there. Where can we buy a motorcycle here? And I say, I don't know. We don't use that. And and they realize that in winter it's difficult to use a motorcycle. So those are the things that they are facing too. And the other one is the language. Mm-hmm. You feel, if you speak Spanish, you go to Mexico, you will be fine. But you only speak English, you will be frustrated. And sometimes I say, Pastor, can you translate it again? Because they were talking a lot, and I don't know what they're saying. Same thing. We come here and they say, oh no, I have no idea what they're saying, Pastor. Can you help me? So most of the time I'm here and there, and those are the challenges. And that can create opportunities for any congregation, for any city, but also can create challenges at the same time. You made a mistake. You say, 10 a.m. you come to church, and they are not there. You make an expectation, oh, they don't like us. You see? Whatever you do, same here. So those are the challenges that can create opportunities, but also challenges for any community, in any place where two humans from two different races, two different backgrounds get together. So, but it's possible.
Yeah, I would love to just add to that just a little bit to say, I think there is a distinction that probably needs to be made here about all of the cultural differences that I could tell you a lot of stories having a family with us right now that have created more hilarious moments in our home than I know what to do with. I think that when you leave a pot on the stove, you're done with it. No, it's done. The heat's off, the rice is there, it's been there a day and a half. It's got to be done, right? We should get rid of that rice. Oh. Nope. We should put it in the refrigerator. Nope, because it won't get eaten if we put it in the refrigerator. Because why would you put rice in the refrigerator? who has a refrigerator? Like, what are you thinking, Pastor? Right? Like, there is so much of this that is hilarious to me where all of a sudden, like, but I mean, in these little cultural things, but I do want to say something, and I don't mean to pick on the phrase, so Peg, don't hear this as a picking on your phrase, but picking on an idea that this phrase can suggest. When we talk about, like, what about people who come with different value systems? I want to be really, like, careful as we pick at that, because one of the things that at least we have experienced, or I'll just speak for myself, that I've experienced is actually yes, we have these different maybe like cultural hierarchies of how we like value certain things on a smaller scale, but something also is really beautiful in that the persons that I've interacted with that are Jesus people in the way that I want to be a Jesus person too. Like, that has been really powerful. When we have interactions and they talk about like, when they talk about their experience, they are thanking God every day for a new day. They wake up, how are you? I'm great, thanks be to God. And they mean it. They don't just throw it away. Like, they hang and clutch onto those words in a way that is deeply faithful and has been profound in my life to hear over and over. And I'm reminded so much about the way in which the coming together of peoples isn't ever a threat scripturally. It's the goal. It's the hope. What happens in Revelation? What happens? What does the church look like? And I saw people numbering thousands upon thousands and 10,000s upon 10,000 from every tribe and nation and language and tongue, bowing before the throne and saying, holy, 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 Lord God Almighty. Isn't that what we're supposed to be working for? Every language and tongue and nation and people, every cultural difference. Because, like, maybe the gringos in the room can't quite clap with the rhythm that we need, but, like, maybe other cultures will help us out with that. Like, we'll figure that out. We need one another. But, like, that's the hope, that's the goal. So when we talk about what does it mean for them to come together, there are challenges, absolutely. And it's also the challenge that the church should readily be like, we're in for that.
That seems like a good note to end on. I'm trying to, this is my first time doing this, and I'm looking at the clock because, we're now 3 minutes over, and I failed.
The clock here works.
I can also closely play the art card. We're just never on time. Come on, flaky artists. Hey, next week we'll keep this conversation going. Lighthouse Ministries will be here. We'll hear from our lawyers and those folks. Every time we turned around while we were down there, we were discussing something we heard or knew, and since I've been back again reading the New York Times, the laws keep changing. What is Title 42? Is it happening? Is it not? Why is it still in place? Depending on what country you're from, you get to do this. Now we have this new app that President Biden announced. Is it good? Is it bad? How's that going to be legally? These are helpful things for us to know. So please come back next week to keep the conversation going. High school, we can talk about that, but we'll talk about it in the basement next week, and we'll get back to our regular discussion. All right.
I just want to say thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Joel.
Yep.
Thank
Go
you,
in
Laura.
peace.
Thank you, Ryan. Thank you, my brothers and sisters. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.